Now here in Matthew, this is a quote from a theological book, and I wanted to share this with you. It's actually multiple quotes all put together. Matthew 1 indicates the salvific implications of the name Jesus when the angel instructs Joseph, "You shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." It is listen to this, it is the only place in the New Testament where saves his people appears with sins. It's the only place in the New Testament where the concept of salvation and sins are in the same phrase from a preacher or a person of God. It's the only place. How does God save his people from their sins? In the birth of Jesus. It's right there in the name. It's the only place. Kind of a central idea for Christianity, right? This central idea is fundamental to our entire belief system. The idea that God is willing to lower himself is fundamental to our entire belief system. So what does it mean when we say we want to follow that kind of God? What does it mean when we say we want to share the gospel? And one of the fundamental things for sharing the gospel is that God lowered himself. It's interesting that religion tends to lift up spiritual leaders, right? Put us on a pulpit. So then you attract people who want to be put on a pulpit. Jesus was put on a manger. Jesus was put on a cross. I know multiple pastors. I'll give you an example. Dean Corden gave this example last week when I was at a pastor's meeting down at camp. He was telling a story how he was talking to a pastor. I'm not going to share the details, but the pastor was doing some pretty sketchy stuff in his personal life. And Dean went to talk to him and said, "Hey, buddy, what's going on?" And the pastor's response was, "What does my personal life have to do with being a pastor?" And Dean was like, "What are you talking about?" Right? I mean, if you're a musician, your personal life has to do with it. If you're a cook, your personal life has to do with it. But if your job is to literally share the gospel about God saving the world from their sins, how can you openly in your personal life divert your time and energy and direction towards sin? The pastor had lost the script. He had lost context of how the gospel's supposed to work, right? He had lifted himself up, and who I am in this position gives me the right to come up here and preach. It has nothing to do with God changing my heart or the gospel coming through me. It's that I'm the pastor, right? You can just see how that attitude. And you can see how that attitude is the opposite of Jesus, right? My grandma, who adopted me, I don't think I ever saw her preach a sermon. But I can tell you, the day that that woman passes away, she's going to fill 3 churches with the people that come and visit her. Because she has loved people her whole life, loved and served and been there for people, right? My wife went and met Alita, her name, my grandma. And it's like, you feel like you're in, when I imagine, if you see Ellen White as an amazing person, when I imagine the goodness of Ellen White, I think of the goodness of my grandma, right? It's like the ideal loving person who just wants to serve Jesus with all they are, right? And I think, that's amazing. I want to be like that. But how did she do it? Can you imagine being a 60-something-year-old woman and allowing some child to come into your house and scream at you about how your rules are stupid? Because that's what she did. I was the child, right? And she took that from me. And now she held her ground. She had boundaries. But she loved me through that process. She showed me the truth. She gave me expectations and believed that I could reach them. She loved me by serving me. And I cannot thank that woman enough. I will be thankful and grateful to her for a debt I could never repay. How much more